It was August 6, 1945, a summer morning just like any other in Hiroshima, Japan. The sun came up over the busy city. People went about their day. World War II felt far away. Almost no one knew what was about to happen. High above, a B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay was getting closer. It carried a terrible weapon, an atomic bomb called Little Boy. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb dropped from the plane. It exploded above the city with unbelievable power. The world had entered the atomic age. The explosion from Little Boy was like nothing anyone had ever seen. A super bright flash of light covered Hiroshima. A giant fireball burned up everything it touched. The heat set buildings on fire for miles. The force of the blast flattened buildings and threw debris everywhere at incredible speeds. Tens of thousands of people died instantly. The people who survived the first blast faced a terrible situation. They had burns all over their bodies. Radiation made them very sick. Hiroshima, once a lively city, was now just rubble and ash. 3 days later, on August 9th, the world watched in horror as it happened again. Another B-29 bomber, called Boxcar, flew over Nagasaki. This time, the atomic bomb was called Fat Man, and it was even more powerful than Little Boy. At 11:02 a.m., Fat Man exploded over the city. Nagasaki was also destroyed. Thousands died right away, and many more were hurt by the blast, the heat, and the radiation. The hills around Nagasaki protected part of the city from the full force of the bomb, but the damage was still a catastrophe. Now the whole world knew the terrible reality of nuclear war. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki shocked the whole world. Everyone struggled to understand the power of these new weapons. For Japan, the bombings were devastating. The country was already tired from years of war, and now it faced terrible destruction and loss. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced that Japan would surrender to the Allied forces. World War II, the deadliest war in history, was finally over. The atomic bombs ended the war quickly, but the cost was terrible. The decision to use atomic bombs on Japan is still one of the most controversial decisions in history. Some people argue that the bombings were necessary to make Japan surrender and avoid a costly invasion that would have killed even more people. They talk about how fiercely the Japanese soldiers fought throughout the war. Other people say the bombings were a terrible act of terror. They argued that Japan was already close to surrendering and that the bombings were unnecessary violence against civilians. The debate about the atomic bombings continues today. The survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki live with the painful memory of the atomic bombings. They are called the hibakusha, a Japanese word for explosion-affected people. The hibakusha have lived with physical and emotional scars. Many suffered from radiation sickness, cancer, and other health problems. They faced discrimination because people were afraid of the effects of radiation. The hibakusha have become important voices for peace and getting rid of nuclear weapons. They share their stories so that the world never forgets the horrors of atomic war. Their stories remind us of the terrible human cost of these weapons. After the bombing, Hiroshima decided to focus on peace and remembrance. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park is a tribute to the victims and a call for a world without nuclear weapons. In the center of the park is the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. The museum has artifacts from the bombing, photographs, and personal stories of survivors. It tells the story of Hiroshima before, during, and after the bombing. The museum teaches visitors about the horrors of atomic war and encourages them to work for peace. Like Hiroshima, Nagasaki also created a place for remembrance and reflection. The Nagasaki Atomic Bomb Museum, opened in 1996, tells the story of what happened to the city. It has exhibits about how the atomic bomb was developed, the events leading up to the bombing of Nagasaki, and how the city was rebuilt. The museum also tells the stories of the Hibakusha and their struggle for recognition and support. The Nagasaki Atomic Bomb Museum reminds us of the terrible cost of war and the urgent need for peace and getting rid of nuclear weapons. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki changed human history forever. They started the nuclear age, a time of both great promise and great danger. The world now lives with the threat of nuclear weapons, which can cause unbelievable destruction. The legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is a call to action. It reminds us that we must work hard for peace, diplomacy, and the elimination of nuclear weapons. The Hibakusha, with their stories of resilience and hope, continue to inspire us. They remind us that even after terrible tragedy, the human spirit can survive. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are symbols of both humanity's destructive power and our ability to choose peace. It is our choice which path we will follow.